So we're going to now move on to hearing from each one of our local government area partnerships that come within our Southern Mallee PCP platform. So we're starting with the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network, and I'd like to introduce Simone Christie, who is the manager of the Birchip Business and Learning Centre. Simone is the former chair of the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network. Over to you, Simone. Thank you.
Thanks, Bronwyn. So I'm in as Birchip BLC. I noticed there is another Simone, so if you see Simone, send any questions to Simone from Birchip BLC. Ian, are you putting the slides up? So yeah, this is just some stats on the Buloke Shire. So we're actually made up of 5 larger towns. So we've got Birchip, Ritchie, Charlton, Donovan, Sea Lake, and then 5 smaller towns, Nuttall, Berry, Mandavie, Watcham and Colgoa. You can see our total population is only 6,200, so while we say they're larger towns, they're actually not that large. But we do have fairly high family violence rates and have noticed a 37% increase when these stats were done. I think that increase has actually increased since stats, but that's probably an increase in reporting, hopefully due to some work that we've been doing around the Call It Out projects. Our other issue is that all the 5 towns are over half an hour apart, so that if you go from one end of the Shire to the other end of the Shire, they can effectively be over an hour apart. And we have very few service providers based in our Shire, so we have visiting service, but it's problematic given we have border issues. So if you lived in Charlton, you might get your service out of Bendigo, but if you lived in Sea Lake, you might get your service out of Swan Hill. If you lived in Donald, you might get your service out of Horsham. So it just makes it a bit more problematic in terms of providing a coordinated approach. Our communities are traditionally farming communities, so there's a lot of stereotypes, and particularly around gender with those families. And we've also had an increase in low socioeconomic families move to the Buloke communities to take advantage of the low-cost housing that we provide. All of our towns except Nullarbor play sport in the North Central, so that gave us that was probably the most united platform, was the North Central Football League, and you'll see towards the end of the slideshow there's a video that we did with the North Central. Our populations are declining and ageing, so we've got 30% of the Buloke populations over 65. Might be the next slide, I think, Eden, please. So how did the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network come about? In 2018, the PCP, Buloke Strategic Health and Wellbeing Partnership, received $140,000 from the DPC Community Partnership for Primary Prevention. And Buloke were fortunate we had Alicia Emerson employed and was based in Buloke. Alicia was a young graduate who'd been living in Geelong but had moved back to Buloke to take up this position. She'd grown up in Berry, which was one of the small towns. She'd been to school in Birchip, and while she was home, she was actively involved in Sea Lake Mandela Tigers football, netball and hockey club. So she had really good connections already and really good insight in how our rural community worked. Alicia then invited the representatives from the local service clubs, schools, neighbourhood houses, local businesses, hospitals, health service, Buloke Shire and health service providers who were providing services to Buloke to join the PCP Buloke Family Violence Prevention Project Working Group. So once we all got together and had met a couple of times, we determined that we'd be the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network, just to ensure that it had a broader focus. So if Alicia's position wasn't refunded, that we could take this group further, that it wasn't just focusing on gender equity. We found that there's other issues in Buloke. So that sort of covers who we are, who are representatives from the council, Southern Health Service, Southern Mallee Primary Care Partnership, Women's Health, Southern Mallee, Mallee Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Services, Buloke Neighbourhood Houses and School Nurses. We created a network statement which was together creating an equal and respectful Buloke community free from family violence, with the aim of preventing and creating awareness of relevant health and wellbeing issues within communities across the Buloke Shire. Since its inception, we probably can't say we've been as good at that as we were in the beginning, but we used to meet very regularly. and were involved in several projects across the Shire. And that really was with the drive of Alicia being full-time and having that administration support and somebody dedicated to the work. We were in the fairly initial stages, so we looked at a lot of work around creating conversations and just starting people on the journey. So I think what we found, or what I found, not coming from a professional background, I was in community development in the neighbourhood house, that the people we were meeting with were already on the journey. So they were a lot further ahead in the community. So when I went to the first workshop that Alicia presented, and it was around sharing the story, I was a bit challenged by what they had to say, and that family violence was related to gender equity, and we hadn't necessarily associated those two things in the past, and we were sort of, we as in community members, were more thinking it was related to low income, alcohol, illegal drugs, those sorts of things. So after I attended that meeting and spoke to other people in the community, they were sort of on the same page as me, like, no, you know, gender equity, you know, I'd come from a strong family of women, so I didn't necessarily think that that was a problem. And I'd been to university, I'd travelled overseas, so I hadn't experienced it personally, so I found it hard to relate that could be the reasons. And, you know, as I, you know, when I got married and I moved back to the country, I had grown up in Birch originally, and moved back when I was pregnant with my first child. And my husband was a teacher, he continued to work, and I was predominantly the home carer of our 3 kids. I worked part-time, but he earned more money than me. He had the better job, but I thought, you know, I'm not a victim of family violence, so how, you know, isn't that just how we've, you know, the roles that suit us best at this stage of our life? And I'd really enjoyed being a stay-at-home mum, and like my husband, I said, you know, I could play golf all day and have lunch with my friends, I would have taken that option too. So I couldn't see that had been a disadvantage to me, so I couldn't see why that necessarily be a disadvantage to others. And then it was in May, so that must have been about February, March, and I think in May I attended the Communities in Control conference and heard Janella Ritzy speak on her book, Not Just Lucky, and and there was quite a lot of speakers at that conference that spoke about it. I started to realise that actually, you know, statistics don't lie, this is real, and you know, that there's lots of different forms of gender equity. And so I come back to Alicia then and said, well, you know, as a local community, what can we do to make a difference? How can we get people to understand this link between gender equity and family violence? So I think it's the next one, please. So so with Alicia, we decided we wanted to start the conversation. So how can we best do this? So we decided we'd have a community forum, and we got together a group of representatives from the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network, and also invited some young people. So I think you can see Ruby in the photo next to Alicia. And so Ruby was 16, Brittany, she's on the photo, she was actually doing exams at the time we had the conference. So she was in year 12 at the school. And my son Harrison, who's 23, he was actually home on a bit of a gap year. So I asked him, and it was actually very interesting to see his perspective. Harry was probably he'd finished his university degree, he'd been travelling overseas, and it was just sort of in a break before harvest started. And Harry's traditionally a boy's boy. He'd grown up in Birchip, he's been captain of footy team all the way through. He'd been school captain, he went to Melbourne University, did agriculture, lived at St Hilda's, and he had a pretty, you know, cruisy life. He came to our first meeting and said, you know, he didn't say at the meeting, but he said to me when we got home, you know, I don't understand what all the fuss is about. He said, you know, and similar thoughts that I had, you know, he'd seen strong women in his life, by that stage, you know, as I'd grown up, as I'd gone to school, I'd gone back to work full time, and yeah, we were fairly equal in our relationship within a home. Had a sister that was well educated, aunties who were very well educated. So he was like me. So then I said to him, well, do you respect women? And he sort of stopped and thought about it for a while. And I think it actually shocked him that he had to stop and think about it. I think he'd just taken that for granted. But then when he was asked the question, he had to stop and think, you know, do I really? But then he did say, like at our next meeting, he said, well, I think whether he said that to me or in the next meeting, but he said that he thought girls had exaggerated when they said at university, oh, look, you know, we can't walk home at night, we wouldn't do that. And then he said when Eurydice Dixon was murdered in the park that was next door to Hilda's, where he lived, so he said, oh, actually, it was a real thing for them. And he's also had said that when he came back to Birchip after having been away to university, that he'd realised the difference in the conversations that his friends would have. He said the conversations that his friends would have in the Birchip pub were actually very different to what they would have when they were in Melbourne or at university. So it was good to have that young male perspective and provide insight into how we'd run the event. We got quite a lot of funding for the event through Southern Mallee Primary Care Partnership, through the Family Violence Executive. We got local sponsorship through WMA Accounting, O'Connor's Farm Machinery and the Buloke Freezer Program. Next slide, please, Eden. And then we put together a group of speakers. So the format for the program was that we'd have a guest speaker who we got Nellie Thomas, and then we would get a panel of locals or people, service professionals, so that there was a good cross-section. Nellie was fantastic. We tried to get Jamal but she was much more expensive, but Nellie was equally as good and facilitated the conversations and the questions and did a really fantastic job of that. We had Alicia's sister. I think if you can see the photo, Alicia's the one on the far right, if you're looking at the screen. Alicia's sister Chantal is next to her, and Chantal at the time had just been drafted to play AFLW with the Melbourne with Melbourne Football Club. So she was really great to have. She wasn't actually a confident speaker by any stretch, and she'd gone to school with my daughter, so I thought, oh, yeah, I think if it hadn't been for Alicia, we wouldn't have got her. But really, the kids really respected what she had to say, and she'd grown up in our community, so they could really relate to her. And she had played football and cricket as a girl in a male-dominated sport, but once she turned 14, she wasn't allowed to play footy. Well, she was mostly wasn't allowed to play footy in the North Central anymore, so she chose to play netball, and cricket was a similar story. So she hadn't actually gone back to football until after when she played university. When she was at university, she played in a girls' football game. My father keeps a diary, and my mother was dying of cancer at the time, and my daughter was playing in the same game, and so we went out to the hospital, went to watch. And Dad wrote in his diary, Francis dying, Chantal brilliant. And then so when Chantal got drafted a couple of years later, he was fairly pleased that she got that opportunity. It was really refreshing for the kids that were in the crowd that day to hear Chantal's story, because it was so genuine and so relatable to how much had changed quite quickly in a short period of time. So Chantal was 24, and at 14 she'd given up. So in that 10-year period, she'd gone from not being able to play football in a country league to playing AFLW. We also had, so we'll go back that way. So the next person next to Chantal is Hayley Cull, and Hayley works for the Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement Plan International Status. So Ruby, who we had in our committee, had actually done her work experience with Hayley. And so Hayley gave a really good insight into stats across the world and the situation that we can't imagine, I guess. Like she gave an example where in South Sudan, more teenage girls die in childbirth than finish high school. So just to give the audience a perspective of how much inequality there is across the world with gender. Next to her is Nellie, and then the young guy next to her is Riley Richardson. He grew up in Warwick-Neville, which is about half an hour from here. At the time, he was a nurse at the Royal Children's Hospital. He was assistant coach for the Geelong Netball Club and Victorian Men's Netball. But he'd grown up in Warwick-Neville, so he was the opposite of Chantal, where he'd want to play netball. Is gay, didn't come out until he left Warwick-Neville. So he was, I guess in that same sense, where it was a different type of gender equity, where his parents were very good and used to take him away a lot to play representative netball. And he said being a nurse, he actually often got mistaken for the doctor. So he said it played in his favour in certain situations. He has actually now gone on to do medicine, but yeah, so it was a really good perspective from the gender equity at both sides. Then we've got Dr. Jessica Croft. I think a lot of you would know she's part of the Rural Challenge Gender Equity Leadership Program. So she gave a lot of context around the research-based evidence from her studies. I also talked about the man box, which I think is something which would be really good to deliver in rural communities. And then next to her is Tony Stevens, who is from the Malmesbury CFA, and he really resonated with a lot of the volunteers in the room, and in particular one who was a hairdresser, and she was on the Birchip CFA, and she said, yeah, they're happy for us to be CFA members, but when we have drills, they don't let us hold the hose. And the interesting thing for us was she was a hairdresser, so lots of conversations happened in that community and in that hairdressing chair, so following that presentation. So I think our speakers were just a really good range and provided a really good perspective. And we had about almost 200 people attend, and just really did create the conversation, which is what we wanted. It just got people talking in the community. Lots of young girls and young boys there who asked lots of really good questions, and just, yeah, felt, I think, that there was, as well as there was gender equality, there was also potential for change, and that change was occurring. And then we did get lots of media coverage, so I think Ben's just putting that up now. You can see sort of a cross-section of ages and people that we had there. The second event that we ran was to promote the 16 days of activism, and this was, and it was called the Buloke United Walk, because it was to show that we were all in this together, that the whole of Buloke was working on it together. So from the Buloke Wellbeing and Equity Network, the Buloke Neighbourhood House coordinators and their local youth groups, so they engaged their local youth groups to lead the walks. So what it was in all of the 10 towns, so what that hadn't been done before in Buloke. Lots of times the money would go to the 5 big towns, very rarely would the small towns be involved. So for the whole 10 towns in Buloke to do something together, and what we did was that on the first day of the 16 days of activism, so Sunday the 25th of November at 10 o'clock in every local park, groups met and went on a walk. It was designed just to be simple, so at 10 o'clock in all 10 communities, led by youth group members and neighbourhood house coordinators, everybody just went for a walk around the town dressed in orange. Local supermarkets donated oranges and fruit, and we'd had water bottles printed with the label. And just had orange face paint and balloons and things like that for the kids. So, and then once again you can see that was a double page spread we got in the Buloke Times with the whole 10 towns walking at the same time. So there's over 200 people across the 10 towns that joined in the walk, and we nominated for the Buloke Shire Event of the Year, and it won. So that was just really nice recognition that that everybody was in it together. It didn't matter whether you were Eastern Health Service or the Buloke Shire, you had a responsibility to be involved. So the last project I'm going to present was the North Central Football League, and that was purely through Alicia. Alicia organised this video to be produced, and she called on a couple of, you know, well-respected people within each of the 8 towns in our North Central Association, and they presented the video. Can we see that, Eden? And the video was then, we showcased set shots out of it to put into the local football recorder. It was shown widely on Facebook, got a huge number of hits, and at the Rex Theatre in Charlton, it's shown before the movie.
Violence against them. It's time to stand up. Violence against women must end.
Every week in Australia, someone's wife, girlfriend,
daughter, sister,
mother, grandmother or friend is killed through domestic violence
by their partner or ex-partner.
This is a national disgrace.
We need to change a culture that disempowers and disrespects women.
Challenge attitudes and behaviours that demean and intimidate women.
Create an environment of equality and respect.
Where violence against women is unthinkable.
We, as men, need to stand up and be accountable.
We must declare any form of violence against any woman unacceptable.
This is not someone else's problem. Change starts with you,
Now, in your community,
at your club.
with your mates.
Will you stand up?
So there has been other work done, there was work done with Alicia and the Buloke workplace organisations, including Eastern Health Service, Buloke Shire Council, O'Connell's, around, there've been lots of projects happening in the workplace, but what I've showcased today is really just what happened from the Buloke Wellbeing Equity Network from a community perspective. Our challenge now, or our challenge since Alicia left, which was July last year, has just been the continuity and the dedicated work on gender equity. I think that having the conversations has enabled us to incorporate more gender equity, put a gender equity lens over the work we're doing in local communities, but without that dedicated worker, it's been difficult to sustain the capacity of the group. And most of the people within the group are either working within their own organisation, have their own projects they're working on, but aren't necessarily in the community. They'll be in their workplace, and the community members around the table, the neighbourhood houses, are all part-time funded and all got capacity issues. So it has been difficult to sustain since Alicia left. Yeah, it's been a really good project and really creative conversation, and it started. We did do a 16 days of activism campaign this year, but it was a bit ad hoc. The money had been given to Buloke Shire, so it wasn't a coordinated approach where we all did the same thing. But there was certainly some work done around 16 days of activism. But other than that, we haven't had a community project other than putting a gender lens over projects we've already running. Thanks, Mum.
Thanks a lot, Simone. Thanks for sharing what's been happening out in Buloke, and it really has been about starting those conversations with community and with organisations and showing that journey at a personal level, but also for the community as well. And I think that's been really important for all of us, certainly in that Buloke group, to reflect back on and remember that along the way, that we're all starting from a different starting point, and for our community, how we bring that back into the prevention work that we do. Now, does anyone have any questions for Simone? We might use the chat function. I haven't seen any questions come up, so we might keep moving on, but if we do get some questions for Simone, we might come back to it after the other LGA working group presentations. But thank you very much, Simone.